What do you think is the most pressing issue the ad industry needs to understand and deal with? There's been a lot of talk leading up to this, obviously. I'd say this is the year of AI, maybe the decade of AI. Certainly, there's not a press release that comes over my transom that doesn't mention two letters A and I in it. So have at it. Feel free to jump in.
Sure. I mean, I'll start. So when I was on the buy side and we would try to make our media smarter by overlaying lots of different kinds of audiences, we would be buying data from a whole bunch of different providers. And a lot of that data is no longer going to be available to us because of what's happening on Chrome and Safari. A lot of that, a lot of states and countries around the world are implementing a lot of privacy regulations, which is going to mean it's going to be a lot harder and harder for advertisers to reach their customers. And every single brand needs to figure out new ways to identify intent. And AI is a great tool to do that in a privacy compliant way. And I think that every agency and every client needs to start exploring how they want to use AI to identify who their best customers are.
It's a great start. Thank you, Barry. I'd like to come back to that, but any other opening issues you'd like to tee up?
Well, I think that Barry makes a good point, and most companies these days are trying to get their arms around their first party data and figuring out ways to enrich that data and expand their ways of using it, perhaps sometimes contextually, just understanding where audiences are and finding lookalike audiences. But it's interesting that, I mean, the cookie and IDFA were ways that were truly anonymous in the ways that people were targeted. And I know there was a lot of agita about that, but I do think we're moving toward a period when first party data is collected and it's much more tied to the actual identities of people. So in a lot of ways, privacy is going to become less even as companies become more compliant.
Okay.
That's an interesting point, Sarah. And I think we think a lot about using, because we're media folks, we think a lot about using AI and technology for targeting and understanding more about our consumers. I think the other area that AI really opens up is the ability to create more targeted content. I think more effective content as well, because you can take that consumer data or whatever data, audience data you're using, and actually use AI to then create multiple variants of ad units or content that's specifically targeted to them. So I think that's another area that AI is going to usher a world in where we'll have more content than we've ever had before.
So people need more content. They need to feed the marketing beast. It used to develop, one or two advertising spots when it was a TV world, or a few versions of a print ad. But now it is, people are wanting to release new content from a brand, almost all the time. Yeah. And I think that one of the big issues, and I know it's probably a hot button for you, Bob, is that generative AI is going to start to be able to automate the creation of a lot of things.
Well, that is a problem. Right. That is another massive problem. I was deliberately not joining in this earlier part of the conversation because I haven't been on your side of the fence ever. I've only been on my side, which is the publisher side, editing side. The things you discussed are all good. There's certainly good applications of AI, and if they could be limited to that, then there would certainly be no concerns. On the editorial side, where we don't need more content, it's the exact opposite. I have a number of concerns, but two essentially. AI is getting better all the time. This is something Joe pointed out to me months ago, and I've never lost sight of it. It is exponentially improving, as makes sense. It's like one of those science fiction movie beasts that just keeps eating and eating and eating and growing and growing and consumes all the DNA and intelligence of all it eats. So it's growing, and it will be able to reproduce editorial that is as good as, I think already it's doing some that's as good as some of the low rent editorial we see online, without a doubt. And we can make fun of it today and say how bad it is and how odd and awkward the wording is. But in reality, it's going to get past that and become very, very, very proficient and write in the style of any great writer we want, from Joan Didion to William Faulkner. The greatest issue I see is that it can, in fact, generate something at a fantastic rate of 100,000 articles a second. So at that point, that's published data I picked up that number from. At that point, the real worry is the drowning, the tsunami, not only of mediocre crap, but of purely monetizable crap created purely to suck up whatever ad units are out there at the expense of credible, valuable, verifiable, important human journalism. So even the New York Times should worry at some point, because if it has an article on Biden's birthday, and AI can generate 200,000 articles on Biden's birthday, it's going to beat it 200,000 to 1. So, you know, it's a problem. The beast it's the genie out of the bottle in many ways. I don't know if we'll get it back in again.
So, you know, Bob, your point about the volume of content, I mean, I've heard that observation, and I think that it's absolutely true. And I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing at Inuvo that is actually our content creation has gotten better because of AI. But I look back at like what's happened in the TV space, right? You have YouTube, which has, I don't even know how many like gazillion gigabytes of whatever that number is of video. And that costs one thing, and that satisfies one need for a lot of people. And then you have Apple TV Plus, and we're willing to pay for that because it's premium and because there's a craft to that sort of content. And I think the same thing is going to happen with text-based content and all kinds of AI content. There will be some content that is mass-produced for a very particular reason that keeps us happy and full. And maybe that's like high fructose corn syrup. And then there's going to be a lot of other things, which is going to be a little bit more premium that will involve more humans, at least for the time being. And that's going to be going to the French Laundry. And that's just sort of the way the world has always sort of stratified.
True, very true. Good point. But the reality is one search will become drowned. It'll just become drowned. And it'll go back to the old days in the sense of analog, where people subscribed to or went and bought a copy of a publication because this is what they wanted, and they chose it. You know, the equivalent today is the homepage. That's the single copy sale equivalent, and subscriptions to subscriptions either way. But I think that we're also going to be honest, we're dealing with a population that's on a bell curve of very smart and very stupid. And my fear is that the lesser educated, the less smart, the less discriminating readers pick up a piece, and that's them satisfied, and they don't even try to go down the spectrum a little further to get something that's a little more nuanced and smart and reasoned and researched. You know, we at Wonderlust, we sometimes research an article for 3 months. Which is unheard of online, especially in a travel set. We take 3 months. Our annual 100 takes 6 months. You know, it's just the old principles of print. Get it right first, you know, before you put it up there. And some of them we do in a day, obviously. You know, we don't do everything that way. But that's not going to have much weight in the new world. And I'm not being fatalistic. I mean, maybe I come across as I don't mean to be. I'm always looking for the way out of this. And there could be a silver lining in that people might appreciate quality again. But I'm afraid the majority of people are going to respond to what's in front of them, and what will get in front of them is AI generated pabulum without even touching the subject of misinformation, which is obviously a danger.
I will say that, I mean, there already is a lot of content. Like, I think that there is something to a brand, you know, a content brand that matters and will still matter. And Bob, I mean, Wonderlust is a great example of that. I recently booked a trip. I had to check out what Wonderlust had to say
wonderful.
before we went there, because I think of Wonderlust as a true authority. And so I think that publishing brands still have to be really careful about not over automating and, you know, putting the stamp of approval and making sure the voice is right, et cetera. I think that, you know, certain publishing brands are going to have the benefit of their own content to use. I don't know that LLMs are going to be able to crawl content for free forever. And that, you know, in my mind, it's meant to get you at least 50% of the way there, you know, quickly. And then a person, you know, jumps in and uses their intuitive knowledge to know what's good and to put the finishing touches on things. I think that's maybe okay. We're also going to rely on maybe Google or the search engines to create rules around what's good.
Also, you know, this, just quickly bring up, we've all read about the massive cynicism of Sports Illustrated, running a bunch of AI-generated, not only AI-generated articles meant to sell products under the aegis of a product review, but also created by AI-generated people. You know, they didn't exist. There's a website that sells photographs of AI-generated people, so you can have an Asian woman, you can have a black man, you can have a white woman, you know. And I think it was Futurism magazine caught them, went to that website and found that all the pictures were for sale, and these individuals were completely fabricated. So the writers are fabricated, the stories are fabricated, and they're passed off as real. And it's Sports Illustrated, one of the great, you know, tent poles of American media. So if the cynicism, see, there are publishers who are so cynical who just do it for the numbers. And I think that's a shame. I'm not sure that's a detriment to society. I'm not sure society sinks under it, but I think it's terrible. We must allow for and compensate for the fact there will be a ton of cynicism. Go Media is doing the same thing, Geo Media, you know.
Well, Sports Illustrated, let's not forget, is still living on the brand that it created, you know, how many years ago. I don't think that they would be in the position to have people reading these articles or discovering them if it was a new brand. They just are so established that, you know, their owners now are coasting a bit and getting away with some things. And there are other publishers who have over-relied on LLMs and automated article writing and have gotten caught out on having multiple errors in their content. So right now, it's really not a good thing to do to just say, oh, you know, feed it into the machine and it'll spit out great articles. And I don't think many are doing that right now.
I think similar to where we are now when buying media, like now people are more discerning. We used to buy Red Network. We used to buy an open bidding. And now, as we know, the trend towards programmatic are inclusion lists, exclusion lists, private marketplaces. So I think that I feel like I hear you, Bob, and I think that is definitely a danger that there'll be more articles written by machines that are of low quality, but I feel like we do live in a low quality world right now. And the media world has found ways to try to address it, to make sure that their advertisers' media show up in reputable places against quality content.
How do you do that on the ad side? I'm intrigued. I mean, I'm of course interested because as a quality publisher, I want to be of value to advertisers, and I fear we may recede ground in this tsunami of rubbish out there. But how does an advertiser consciously avoid the dreck, the stuff that's out there, just like picking up the programmatic?